I'm Donna Fick. I'm one of the co-mentors along with Wes Eli for the NIDUS mentoring piece of the NIDUS grant, which is Networking for Delirium and Unifying Scientists, which is a international collaborative, not just the United States, but international, where we support and mentor both junior researchers and senior researchers. And we do that through several mechanisms, but one of our big mechanisms is on a boot camp, the Delirium boot camp. That's an intensive 3 days of didactic sessions, of an intensive mock review session where the participants actually submit their own research and then get mock reviews. And we're very pleased to have one of our boot camp alumni. And then the other piece of this, which I'm sure that Dr. Fiest may talk a little bit about, is that we also have a piece where we continue to have mentoring, and that's facilitated by Kirsten and by Dr. Tamara Fong, where they work very closely with junior researchers and help review and discuss each other's grants and papers. So it's my pleasure to introduce her. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Critical Care Medicine, Community Health Sciences, and Psychiatry at the University of Calgary, and the Director of Research and Innovation in the Department of Critical Care Medicine. She has a PhD in epidemiology and completed a postdoctoral fellowship in psychiatric epidemiology, just perfect for delirium. Since joining the University of Calgary in 2015, she has received numerous peer-reviewed grants and awards for teaching and mentorship. Her research program focuses on engaging critically ill patients and family members in research and care beyond the bedside. And I also want to especially thank Kirsten, because I know that she was just at the American Delirium Society for several days and presenting her research there. So I'm sure she's coming back to an office full of emails. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
You can do it however you want, but we will have a little time for questions at the end, and we also have a chat box. All right, and everyone mute. If you're not speaking, please mute.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Donna, and for inviting me to do this webinar today. I greatly appreciate it. Yes, I am just returning, got back last night from Boston, but I'm really happy to do this, and that was a great meeting as well. So today I'm going to be speaking to you about my journey to where I got and how I got to where I am today. I'm going to speak a little bit about my research program and then some tips and tricks I've kind of picked up along the way. So just to briefly start, to give you an idea of how I got where I am. So my interest in research really started in 2007, 2008 when I did an honors degree in psychology, and that's a picture of my honors supervisor there, Dr. Tavis Campbell, and that's when I really started to get interested in the mind and the brain. And so subsequent to my honors degree, I went on and did a PhD in epidemiology with Dr. Scott Patton, who's a psychiatric epidemiologist and psychiatrist, and Dr. Natalie Jeté, who is a health services researcher and epileptologist, and started to study depression and epilepsy, and went on to do a postdoc at the University of Manitoba to study depression and anxiety in people with MS and rheumatoid arthritis. And since 2016, I have been on faculty at the University of Calgary, and in the corner there is a picture of some of my team, and I'll get into a little bit more of that later, and that takes us to the present. So I'm going to spend the next 40 minutes or so discussing what I consider to be the keys to my success. And so you can see that there's 10 topic areas I'm going to cover. So the team, mentors, network, peers, students, projects, funding, focus, writing, and balance. So to start, about the team, developing a team is really important. And I think these are kind of some of the key things that I've found that make a team work. And so trust is right up there. My team trusts me and I trust my team. And it takes a little bit of time to build that rapport, but having trust in your team certainly helps take things to the next level. And one thing I've found is that it's really important to hire people with a varied skill set. So instead of having little cookie cutters of me running around, though I would love that, I have a team of people who have degrees in basic science, applied epidemiology, medicine, and biomedical technology, and a whole variety of different things. And I think those different perspectives really enrich the team and help to look at things from a different perspective. Communication and collaboration among your team and between teams, and I'll go into this later, is key. And I think open and honest communication is really important. And one of the things that we've actually done on our team is we have patient partners as members of our team. So we have about 10 or 12 patient partners that we engage as equal members of the team, and they are involved in our research program and projects from start to finish. And so that's really changed how we do research in Calgary, and I think for the benefit of everyone. And one thing that everyone will in my lab will speak to is that we like to have fun together. In fact, I walked into my office this morning after coming back from 4 days away with a bunch of Star Wars gag posters all over my office. So my team knows how to have fun. They know that we like to have fun and keep things light. And I think actually by having that rapport and being able to have fun, we end up just working so much harder because we all feel that we're there to support each other. And so I've noticed that, having a little bit of fun every once in a while is okay. And one of the key things that I've learned in the last few years is to not be afraid to delegate. I think one of the problems that junior investigators get into is coming from your training, you're used to being in charge of a project and everything from start to finish. And once you become a PI, you have to be able to delegate things. And it's okay that the work that you're doing might not be, the work that your team is doing isn't exactly the way you would have done it. Because in fact, many times having a different perspective and having a different way of writing and thinking is actually really beneficial to everyone. So I think not being afraid to delegate is really critical to expanding your research program, because there's no way one individual person can do everything themselves. And so this is my team. So we have a number of individuals. Here you can see we have some of my team are undergraduate students, master's students, PhD students, patient partners, research assistants, research associates, and research managers. And so we really just have an amazing team. Obviously, it's all women, which isn't done on purpose, but I'm happy about that. We really get along well and love working together. So having a diverse team of experience, backgrounds, I think just enriches the group as a whole. And so when it comes to patient partners, there's a few key things to think about and why I would encourage you to consider engaging patient partners in your research. And that is, I think it makes research more accessible for people. It can decrease selection bias in terms of who agrees to participate and who doesn't agree to participate in your studies. It's a way for you as a researcher to give back, and it's also a way for patients to give back as well. It provides a really valuable perspective on your research, and they can actually be really helpful in engaging other patient partners as well. It really helps, we find that families feel less overwhelmed if they have someone that's speaking to them about a research project that has been there and has that lived experience. And we found actually that in turn, our response rates greatly increase and our recruitment goes much faster when we engage patient partners to help us actually recruit for our studies. So just some pictures of our team at different events that we do. So the top picture is we went and painted pottery one evening and ordered a bunch of pizza. And the middle is just our team one day at work, just taking a break to tell each other how much we like each other. And the bottom, we had a big kind of picnic event at a park in Calgary where we played games and got to know each other a little bit better. And so this picture at the bottom includes my team and some of my colleagues' team members as well. And so that brings me into the next topic, which is mentors. And I think obviously NIDUS is a really good example of organization where the importance of mentors and mentorship cannot be overstated. And when you're whether you're mentoring someone or you are a mentee, being engaged and energized is really crucial to having a good mentoring relationship. And I think part of that is making it a win-win relationship. The mentor should get something out of it, as should the mentee. And I think that's the best way to sustain and maintain a good mentoring relationship. And if you can look at mentorship as a way to give back, I'm sure many of us in our positions feel that we are successful due to the excellent mentorship we've received. And so I think mentoring is a way to give back to people who you can see will make a difference in the future. So I think you can also think of mentorship in three different ways. So the top two people on this picture are people that I look to for peer mentorship. So Dr. Carasaro and Dr. Dan Niven are both members of the Department of Critical Care Medicine in Calgary, and they really help me bounce ideas off of each other, and we work through kind of the struggles of being a new faculty member. The individual in the bottom left of the picture is my mentor and now my department head in Calgary, and he is probably my main mentor, and that's more of the traditional mentor-mentee relationship. And then the bottom right is me and Brianna, who was at ADS as well, presenting some of her research, and she's someone that I mentor myself. And so this leads into the third point, which is about building a strong network. And so one thing that we've done in Calgary is built a strong local network to really help elevate the level of our research. And so part of networking is saying yes to opportunities, and I'll get into this later, how you can't say yes to everything, but saying yes to opportunities is really important. And networking is a way to collaborate. And it's also a way to use media and social media to build your network. So we'll go into each of these a little bit. So in the beginning of 2018, 4 of the research-intensive faculty members in the Department of Critical Care Medicine, so Dr. Tom Stelfox, myself, Dr. Gina Parsons-Lee, and Dr. Dan Niven formed the C3 Research Network. And so C3 stands for Calgary Critical Care Research Network. And what we did was we hired a research program manager, and we split her salary, and we have seen a significant uptick in our impact of our research since moving in this direction. And part of the reason is that we share resources. So we share physical resources as well as human resources. So we share team members. And so it's a way, you might have a project and you might only need a day or two of a research assistant or a person to help you per week. And so if you can pool your resources with other members of your department or other departments to capitalize on some of the funding that you have to take it to the next level, it's really important. And one thing we've actually found is the shared wins feel really good. So Dr. Parsons-Lee received a grant from CIHR, which is our Canadian NIH equivalent, last week, and the rest of us were all co-PIs on the grant, and it felt really good for the team, to win, to have a win together, and we can celebrate. And we've definitely noticed that we're known, at least in the Canadian critical care community. People now know our network, and I mean, we just made this logo on Canva, so it wasn't like it was anything extravagant or expensive, but we've definitely noticed the benefits of doing this. And so the NIDUS Bootcamp specifically was an opportunity, and I think, Donna, you can correct me after if I'm wrong, that the deadline has not yet closed. So if people are interested, yes, I'm right, that they should really consider this. So I'd like to highlight 4 of the areas that I found really beneficial for the NIDUS Bootcamp. And the first was the mock grant reviews. So as part of the process to participate in the bootcamp, you submit a grant application, which, you might think sounds like a lot of effort, but in reality, you can take that grant application, get the feedback, and actually translate it into a submission to another funding agency. But the main thing that I found really important and helpful for me was actually seeing how the grant review process works. And so they actually do like a mock NIH section panel to review the grants. And so shortly following the NIDUS Bootcamp, I was invited. Once you get a CIHR grant, you're allowed to then be a reviewer on other CIHR grants. And so I was invited to sit on a grant review panel, and I found that even just that experience at the NIDUS Bootcamp set me up a little bit better than I think a lot of my more junior colleagues would have been to know what to expect and to know how they run and to know how that process unfolds. So that was really, really beneficial for me. Making new connections was incredible, and I think that being at the American Delirium Society this weekend was just testament to that. It's really nice to go to a meeting where you know people. It's really intimidating to go to a meeting when you don't know anybody there. And so to know faculty that are more senior, and then to see the other people that were attendees at the NIDUS Bootcamp, and to see them doing really well too, and winning awards for their posters and their oral abstracts. It's really cool, and it just speaks to the quality of the individuals that attend these boot camps. And it really does help you form a Delirium network. So now if I have, questions or, thoughts, I can go to the NIDUS website, or I can send an email to some of our colleagues, and they can help you really expand your network. And then the Junior Faculty Working Group, which Donna mentioned earlier, was a really amazing opportunity that came out of the boot camp that I actually wasn't even expecting. And so I spent a year with Dr. Tamara Fong as a participant in the boot camp that she was running. And then because there was so much interest, she asked if I would be interested in running a separate junior faculty working group. And so we've just had one such meeting. So there's still lots of learning for me to do, but I really appreciate the opportunity to start, mentoring other junior faculty in that capacity. And so the boot camp really provided me a lot of invaluable experiences, and I couldn't even begin to quantify, how much help that boot camp was for me early in my career. And one thing that our research program manager has done, and one thing that I've certainly benefited from, is the use of media and social media in promoting your research. And so the top panel picture there, Bonnie, is the main patient partner. We use the term patients as an all-encompassing term that also refers to family members. And so Bonnie's mom was in a Calgary ICU a number of years ago, and Bonnie has now become a member of our team. And then there's myself and Dr. Stell Fox. And so the University of Calgary publishes a magazine twice a year. And so they did an article on our team and on the work that we're doing with Bonnie. And then on the bottom, you'll see a few pictures. So I was named one of Calgary's top 40 under 40 last year. And so that picture's from there. I try to use Twitter, though I must admit I'm not probably as active or as good at Twitter as I should be. But ADS was a really good opportunity to do that. And so I think, once you get comfortable with Twitter, I think you'll find it a really valuable way to engage other scientists, and also to disseminate your work more broadly and to reach an audience that you might not otherwise have been able to explore. And then the next picture is another magazine article that Alberta Health Services, which is our single-payer unified health system employer in Alberta, they did an article on our family delirium work as well, and that was disseminated throughout the entire province of Alberta. So if you can really smartly engage the media and use social media, I think you'll notice that it will really help, elevate the work that you're doing, and especially with dissemination. And so there's my Twitter handle, and then as well the C3 Research Network's Twitter handle as well. And so having good peers and developing a good peer network is really important. And so it's really, I found it really helpful to have a similar stage peer group. And so obviously we have mentors that are much more senior, but having a group of individuals at this similar stage, and I think the Junior Faculty Working Group is an example of this, is really important. It can help foster engagement. It can help inspire you. And so I think the idea of having a peer group is for you to be able to really, inspire each other to be better and to do better. And so you want to set expectations high. You want to be able to articulate why the research you're doing is important, and really, convince your peers that your research is meaningful. And if you can do that, then I think you can ultimately, convince anyone. And so they're a really good sounding board to be able to do such a thing. And so I discuss just here present a little bit of how you can think about collaboration. And so when you're having collaborations with peers and you're talking about, mentoring each other, there are more formal settings like the junior faculty working group, and then there's also, more informal ones. And I think though we maybe haven't been following these pillars of collaboration explicitly, I think the NIDUS junior faculty working group is actually a really example of how this is done. So you need to develop your collaborations, you need to sustain them, you need to monitor them to make sure that they're going well and serving the purpose. And if you ideally can measure informally how they're going, then you can strive to improve them and to make them better. And so that's something that we've continuously done during the junior faculty working group, is to touch in to see what people want, what's working well, what's not working well, and how we can make it better. And then we can really celebrate wins together. So like I said, when, our NIDUS Bootcamp colleagues are winning awards at ADS, it's really cool to see that, and it really does allow you to celebrate those wins together. And so the next thing I'll discuss is students. And so it's really crucial to choose the right students. And anyone who's had, that's easy for me to say because I've been on both sides of this, but people will know, other faculty, that if you have a student that maybe isn't quite right, it can really be a drain on both you and your team. And so I believe in order to grow your research, you really got to know your students well. And so I favor a less traditional mechanism of performance reviews with my trainees, and I tend to use a more real-time system of feedback and a lot more one-on-one interaction. That's coming from someone who is more junior and probably has more time, but right now I think that's really crucial for me as a junior faculty member to provide that support for trainees, because I think that until you have a big lab that's self-sustaining and everyone supports each other, I think it's really crucial for the PI to do that. And so in order to get the most out of your students, I think there's a few things to think about. And so the first is that all students are unique, and it might be tempting to treat all trainees the same, but I think it's really important to get to know your trainees as individuals so that you can provide the most meaningful feedback to those people, because everyone receives feedback differently. And I think one important thing, though, you guys are having to listen to me talk for 40 minutes, not just talking, but actually listening is also really an important part. And you'll pick up on subtle things if you're able to do that. And being available for one-on-one meetings is really something that my trainees have come to me time and time again and said that they really value, is having that. And so we have consistent standing meetings set up. Now, we don't always use them. So some of my trainees like to have a standing meeting every 2 weeks. Some like to have a standing meeting every week. So I leave it up to them. We have a 30-minute recurring meeting in our calendars, and some weeks we use them, some weeks we don't. But the fact that they know that that time is available is really important for them. And it's actually important for me too, because sometimes if I'm flying through a week and I want to touch base with a student, it's nice to know that I'm going to have that opportunity. So for example, I meet with one of my PhD students every Thursday at 3:30. And so I have, looking forward to having that meeting today, because we haven't seen each other in a week since I've been gone. So that consistency is really critical. And so one thing I've begun to learn about setting up projects and maintaining projects is that I think it's crucial to have projects going on at different stages of development. And by that, I mean, some are going to be really nascent and they're going to be in their idea stage. And then some are going to be, in data collection. Some are going to be, you're waiting for the results to be analyzed. Some you're going to be writing. And I think that that's really good to maintain productivity. And it's ideal if some projects can build on each other. If you're doing a pilot project, that you can then take the lessons from that pilot project to translate into improving your next set of projects, I think is really important. And I found that, a successful project is one that engages a broad network of people, especially stakeholders. And that's one thing that I've noticed, is that the research that I do that engages stakeholders, and by that I mean the clinicians, so the clinicians are, physicians, nurses, PTs, OTs, RTs, social workers, everyone in the ICU who we're working with, if they're engaged up front, super important. Other researchers, decision makers, people who are going to be using your research at the end of the day, that is really beneficial for having a project be successful. It's less successful when you engage them at the end, because then they feel a little bit differently and maybe less invested than they would if you would engage them up front. So these are examples of some projects that we've had come out recently that I was involved in at different levels. So the first one was a paper that well, you can't even see my name, which leads you to believe where I am on the author list, which is somewhere in the middle. That project that I was a collaborator on, that some members of our group did, using administrative data from our Alberta information to talk about the safety of discharging ICU patients directly home as opposed to going to a medical ward. And the middle paper is a systematic review that we had going on at the same time, looking at the incidence and prevalence of delirium subtypes in adult ICUs. And so Carla, who is my senior research coordinator and actually won an award at ADS, she was working on that, and that's another type of data analysis method. And then the final paper just came out a few weeks ago, and it's about a pilot study that we did that was actually doing data collection in the ICU. And so you can see, by having multiple projects using different sources of data, you're able to, I think, maintain a bit of productivity that way. So those are just some examples of that. So now I'd like to spend a little bit of time just telling you about the different projects that we have going on right now in my lab. And so the first is the Family ICU Delirium Detection Study, or how we refer to it as FIDS. And so the goal of FIDS was to see if family members could accurately detect delirium in the ICU. So we validated 2 family-administered delirium detection tools, so the FamCam, which Dr. Inouye created, and the SOUR7, which I had no role in naming, but would like to speak with the authors to let them know that the patients don't love that name. But we validated those 2 tools against a reference standard, which was a DSM-5 diagnosis of delirium in the ICU. And we are currently, actually, I just finished in integrating the co-author feedback while I was on the airplane yesterday, so I'm looking forward to submitting that soon. And so this was really the first study that I had that kind of came out of my lab. That was a study that I collected primary data for, and it kind of led us to the next big project that we have going on. So this is the goal of FIDS, is to evaluate the validity of these family-administered delirium detection tools. And so from November 2017 to March 2019, there were 190 is not, that number is not right. I think it should be 1,190, people admitted to the Calgary ICU. And 196 of those people were eligible to participate in the study. So you can see, like, only 10% of people. So it really is challenging to recruit sometimes for these studies, but 147 of them consented. And so IFAM-Ed, or the ICU Family Education on Delirium project, is another project that we have going on in our lab right now, and it really dovetails on to FIDS. And so what IFAM-Ed is doing is there's a few goals, and the first is to develop an caregiver ICU delirium knowledge questionnaire to see if we could measure how much caregivers know about ICU delirium, and then to create, validate, and refine an educational module to educate caregivers, ICU caregivers, about delirium. So I'm just going to go back. And so there was a pre-existing caregiver delirium knowledge questionnaire for use outside of the ICU, and so we adapted it to the ICU context. I'm sure you all know from your work that ICU patients are a little bit different in terms of those patients on the general medical ward, in that they're usually mechanically ventilated or sedated to a point where it makes the measurements and assessments of delirium a little bit more challenging. And so what this educational module will do is provide education to family members on how to employ non-pharmacological interventions to prevent and manage delirium in the ICU. So we're really excited about this. We're doing a pilot quasi-experimental study of this right now to see how this works in the ICU and how knowledge is maintained post-ICU, to see if family members, maybe when they have a high-risk patient that's back in the community, to see if they still could notice any changes that might be indicative of delirium in the community. And so the next big project that we have going is the Activate study. So activating family caregivers in the identification, prevention, and management of delirium. And so Activate will be starting at the beginning of September, and it's a multi-center randomized control trial of family-partnered delirium prevention, detection, and management in the ICU. And so what Activate actually will do is build on both of FIDS and IFAMED. And so what we're going to have family members do is learn how to learn non-pharmacological strategies and learn how to detect delirium using the tool so that they can ultimately have a multi-component intervention that hopefully will improve both patient and family member outcomes. So what are some lessons learned from this work? So we've had these projects going on for a couple years now. And so some of the main barriers that we've identified from this work is that about 20% of admitted ICU patients don't have family present. So obviously, this is a huge problem when you're trying to recruit for a family partnered study. And what do you do about those 20% of patients that don't have family? They don't have that person there to provide that. And so we're trying to think of innovative ways that we can engage other people to provide that level of support. Family was not always present for the assessment, so we were recruiting people for up to 5 days, but there's quite a bit of missing data at some points because, family's not necessarily there all the time. Family is sometimes overwhelmed by the ICU, and so that was a common reason for people not wanting to participate. And then there's a little bit of staff resistance, and I'm sure you can appreciate that when you're maybe trying to change how care is delivered, staff can be a bit resistant, but that's why it's really important to engage them up front. And so the solutions to these barriers is that we added a former ICU family member to our study team. We engaged the ICU bedside nurses in our study. We provided incentives to all nurses. So to any nurse who participated in the study, we, anytime they did anything with our studies, we take their name and we put it in a draw, and we do 2 copy card draws every month. So just to show up and how integral of a role the nurses really do play in delirium care in the ICU. And then we also engage nursing management. And this was just, I think, an important message to send to everyone on the unit, that the nursing management was on board and thought that this was important. And I think that really made the nurses feel more comfortable with the work that we were doing. So one thing, how do you do all of this work? Well, you have to get money. And so, I started on faculty 3 years ago. And so I didn't really have any money, and my ideas weren't really great. So I really would be embarrassed if any of you read some of the earlier things that I came up with. But I did eventually find something that I think worked really well. And so one piece of advice I would have is to start small and to build small projects into bigger competitions, to finish what you start. So it's really it can be really easy to think that you should just apply for 100 different grants, and if you got them all, what are you going to do? So I think it's really important that if you get a grant, that you do the research you say you're going to do, and you finish that grant and you publish it. And that is something that I think junior faculty maybe have a bit of a harder time doing, is taking things to execution, executing them right to the end. Because eventually, if someone's looking at your CV, they're going to want to see evidence that you got the money and that you actually did something with it and that you did the science you said you're going to do. And then it's really important to strategically build your grant team. So it might be really appealing to just throw every single person that you know on a grant. But the problem is, and from sitting on a few grant review panels now, what I've noticed is that people are like, well, what are these people even doing? Reviewers of grants are going to say, how much time does so-and-so really have to give to this? So I think it's really important to think about the specific roles that everyone is going to have and strategically build your team to support all of the roles that you are looking for to fill. And so this is just an example of how I was able to cobble together money to even do the work that I have. So I got, you know, early on in 2016, I got 3 small grants that totaled, I think, like 45,000 Canadian dollars between the 3 of them. So 30,000 American dollars. And I was able to get some pilot data, hire some people, and start to capitalize. So with that pilot data, I was able to get a small CIHR grant that then led to me getting 3 larger grants later on in 2017 that for probably, I think about 650,000 was the total for all 3 of those. So now I'm able to actually do the research, but it started small. It started little local competitions, pilot data that then allowed me to be able to translate that into larger grants. And I think that that's really important, especially early on when you don't have that pedigree and CV, that people will just know that you're going to be able to do something. You need to show them that you can do it. And so when it comes to finishing what you start, do not be afraid to spend your grant funds. Obviously, you want to use them judiciously, but I have a number of colleagues that are at the point now with their granting agencies that they've actually told them they're not allowed to have any more extensions because they're just not spending their money. And so that means there's not publications coming out of those grants either. And so it's really important to hire the right staff and engage the right students for your projects and to set really clear timelines. So focus. How do you focus? You have to set goals. I think you really need to think clearly about what your likes and dislikes are and have a selective approach to saying yes. And by that, I mean, don't be flattered into saying yes. I am a perfect example of this. The last 4 weeks, I went to 5 meetings in 5 cities and took about 15 flights. It was a huge mistake. But when someone says, oh, we really want you to speak at our meeting, I'm like, oh, somebody likes me, so I'm going to say yes. And then I got myself into this pickle where I've only been home for like 4 days in the last month. And so that's really challenging. And then also meetings, and I'll chat a little bit about why I think meetings need focus as well. So I like to set 1-year, 5-year, and 10-year goals for myself. And the 10-year and 5-year goals are less granular than the 1-year goals, which might be more about, you know, graduating a specific student or publishing certain work. The 5-year and 10-year goals are more, you know, what am I hoping to do from here? You know, I'm an assistant professor 3 years in. What are my bigger goals? What am I going to do in 10 years? What's my lab going to look like? How am I going to take this work I'm doing to the next level? And so I have a Word document that I just kind of tweak as I go, and I find it helpful to keep my eyes on the big picture, because sometimes it's really easy to get bogged down on little things, and which is why I always say celebrate your wins, because in academia there aren't many, and there's a lot less wins than there are rejections usually. So it's really important to have big picture goals, so that when you're feeling down and you're feeling like things aren't going your way, that you can look towards what you're ultimately trying to achieve. So one thing that I think is really important to do, and Dr. Sharon Strauss and Dr. Gordon Guyatt, who I'm sure many of you have heard the name Gordon Guyatt before, but they wrote a book on mentorship in academic medicine. And one thing that they suggest people do is frequently review what you like and dislike about your day. And specifically, they suggest that you should think about what you are currently doing that you want to continue doing, what you're currently doing that you don't want to continue to do, and what you're currently not doing but would like to do. And I think that really helps you prioritize and focus what you're working towards and what's important to you. And then you can ask mentors and other people to help you strategize how to actually action those into reality. Meetings. So what I've started doing, though I'm not very good at always, is to choose a meeting day or 2 or 3 and try to schedule all your meetings on that day. Some people don't like that approach. My husband thinks I'm crazy that I have like a meeting day that is just like all day Wednesdays I meet, but I find that clears up other days. And so now I've had to be a little bit more selective about what meetings I say yes to. And I like the meetings to be more action oriented. So instead of having meetings to just update on progress, that can be done in an email. I find that meetings need to be goal oriented and action oriented. And for me, I find the meeting days are good. I actually block Mondays and Fridays and have no meetings on Mondays and Fridays, because then I know I have that time. And then my other days are just a right mess, and I still haven't found the balance, but I'm working on it. And so one thing I asked Dr. Inouye for advice on when she spoke to our junior faculty working group was balancing writing grants and writing manuscripts. And so I think this is really important for junior faculty, because your CV needs to keep growing, but at the beginning, I think you might find, and I found this, that your productivity in manuscripts goes down when you're trying to apply for a lot of grants, because how do you have time to do everything? And you need money in order to write manuscripts based off of your data. So I think trying to find a balance between manuscript writing and grant writing is a challenge. And I have a big whiteboard in my office, and I have the word write just written on the whiteboard, because I need to remind myself. And so some advice that Dr. Inouye gave was that, write a little bit every day. And one thing I've found that advice I give to my mentees is you can edit something even if it's really bad, but you can't edit a blank page. So get your ideas out there, get your ideas down, and you can mold them and work on them. And so ultimately, I think balance is key. And you always hear people talking about work-life balance, and I am sometimes better at this than I am at others. My husband is a lawyer, and I'm sure anyone else who has a busy, spouse, if you don't have kids, it's really easy to get both caught up in working a lot. And so I try to make time to enjoy my life as well as the work that I do. Academia is flexible in that sometimes you can take some time for yourself, and I think that's really important. Like I said, celebrating the small wins. If you get a paper accepted, if you get a grant, if a student gets a grant, it's definitely worth celebrating. And me days are important. So because I've been traveling a lot, last Friday, I just decided I was going to take the day off, and I told my team, I just need this day for me. When you travel on weekends, you don't get a break. And so I took Friday off, and I hung out with my nieces and nephews, and it was really awesome. And it was a recharge day. So when you're a PI, it's easy to get caught up in making sure that your lab and your team and everything is running smoothly. But you have to remember that you're the person that holds it all together. And if things start to go awry with you, it can ripple through your team. So just to make sure that that you put yourself at the forefront every once in a while. And so just to reiterate, I went over what I think are some keys to success. And thank you so much for your attention.
That was fabulous. And I loved a lot of, you can see I took a couple of notes. But let's start with the people on Zoom with questions, and then I know I have a couple.
But some of your tips were super helpful, Kirsten.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Right. So I think the one that I particularly liked was you can edit something that's really bad, but you can't edit a blank page, right? And that's where I find myself struggling, because I sat down to revise a book chapter the other day, and I just had to add a few minor paragraphs, and I wanted those paragraphs to be perfect. And I just couldn't write them because you overthink it, right? And so I think that kind of reminder of, even if it's a writing brain dump, just do it, because you never know what you're going to say that might even be really fabulous.
Exactly.
Nice to see you again. Sorry.
Yes, it's nice to see you too. It's really, I totally agree. And that's one thing, I'm sometimes better at giving that advice than taking it. But you want everything to be perfect. And then it's okay to have a sentence that you work through 4 or 5 times before it's right. But you get so caught up in it being right the first time that you can't get anything down. So thank you, Andrea. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I find that helpful too.
I thought it was really valuable as well that you shared about, making sure that you're delegating. It is very difficult. You're so used to, at least I was so used to being the person in charge of everything and doing everything. And it's so much easier for you to get it done yourself than to expect somebody else to do it and try to explain what you want done. And so I really valued that comment, to just, You just have to do it and, let them do it their own way as well with guidance from you. So thank you for that. Lots of great pearls. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you, Kim.
I was just going to say, I really liked your research pearl of including your family member on the research team, right? So I'm involved with a couple of hospital advisory boards, and family members are a really critical part of that as of late. But I haven't seen them so much in the research world, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's challenging, and I could probably give a whole 40-minute talk on what not to do, but it's worth it in the end.
Yeah.
My first question was actually about that, because I know that's now something that, we've done with the IHI network, trying to do with research studies. Don't have 40 minutes, but if you had just like a couple of tips of, how to overcome some of the challenges in selecting people correctly to be on these advisory boards, whether it be, an implementation advisory board or one for research. And I really like the idea of how it obviously increased your recruitment.
Yeah, so I'd say, a couple pearls, training is essential, and close supervision, especially at the beginning, is really important. Now, I guess to preface, to go one step back, how do you even find the right people? So that's one of the biggest things, because people who participate in advisory boards typically are more highly educated. They're usually a little bit older, and so they might not necessarily be representative of everyone. But how we found a lot of people is actually Twitter, and just to say, we're doing a research project on this, or do you have any thoughts on this? Please let us know. And so using social media as a way to find people is really critical. Now, it's hard sometimes. Some people have really positive or really negative experiences, and it's really important to manage them and to set clear expectations from the beginning. So we actually have a contract that I'd be happy to share with people if they're ever looking to pursue this, that goes over shared expectations about workload, about how much you'll be paid for certain things, about what our expectations are. And we go over it all from the beginning so that there's not clear. We had one patient review a grant for us, we had a number, and 3 or 4 of the patients reviewed and submitted, I think, like 3 or 4 hours. And then this one patient submitted like 45 hours for reviewing the grant, and it ended up costing us like $1,500. And we realized that was just a huge mistake, because we didn't set the expectation, and we thought that it should have only taken a few hours, but they obviously wanted to spend a lot of time, and that's not their fault. So we now set really clear expectations. We provide training, and we engage them in our team building activities as well, and that's important for sustaining engagement. And the one last thing I'll say about that is patients always talk about what's meaningful, and they want to be meaningfully engaged. And I'm putting that in quotes because what's meaningful differs to different patients. And so it's actually just really important to ask them, what do you want to do? What would make you feel that you got something out of this? And you'll find that then it's easier to kind of find a role for them.
Very helpful, very helpful. And then I have 2 easy ones. One is, could you repeat,
Sure.
Could you say it before, but could you repeat for others the mentoring book? And
Yes.
And then one more, for your FIDS and Activate, do you include people with dementia? Great
question. So the 2 authors are Strauss, Straus, and Sackett, Sackett. Mentorship in Academic Medicine is what it's called. And it is a really good book for both people who mentor and for people who are mentoring people to think about importance. So I mean, our library has an e-copy, so your libraries might have that as well, but really valuable, good gift to give people too if you're looking to buy like an academic gift for someone that's always hard. Like, this is a good book as well. In terms of including people with dementia, we do include people with mild and moderate dementia, but not people with severe dementia in our studies. And that's something that we've talked a lot about. Now, we don't get a lot of people with severe dementia in the ICU, so I don't think we've seen a lot of people excluded from our studies for that reason. it tends to be the people who have had like massive strokes or subarachnoid hemorrhages or something. Those tend to be the patients that we exclude for neuro reasons, not the people with dementia.
Thank you. And then I wanted to just make a comment too, is I loved, several of your things. I like to finish what you start, because I often will tell mentees that, it's important, even if you get $25,000 or $50,000, to finish that, do your best to enroll and finish on time, and then publish it. And I think related to that is just don't be flattered into saying yes. And that I think it's also very easy in academics to go to too many meetings, or to accept, and even when you're a senior in your career, and to say,
yeah.
You don't want any presentation on your CV really that you haven't turned into a publication. And if you see a lot of that, then you probably need to step back and say, am I going to too many meetings? Am I not? And then another book that I really like is called How to Write a Lot. And one of the things I like, it's called How to Write a Lot. And it's cheap and it's on Amazon. But one of the things I like about that is they sort of cut through all the philosophy stuff and really have a thing about, how to write. The way to write a lot is to write a lot. And the way to write a lot is to schedule writing, and to really, really schedule it. And they actually have a spreadsheet that shows you how to track your writing. An example I get, a couple of people knew this, but I like to run, so I have a run streak. And so one day I looked at the number of hours and I thought, oh my God, if I actually did that with writing, if I actually had a writing streak and actually spent the same amount of hours that I do writing, then, I would have 50 publications a year, not my current number. So just thinking how to write a lot is by writing a lot.
Thank you. And it's very reasonably priced on Amazon. I just looked it up. So that's an amazing tip for all of us. Thank you, Donna.
Nikki had a really good writing book too, and I forget the name of it, but I'll have to get it from her. But I think the other tip that you brought up that's super important, and I know someone, Andrea GB, does this really well, which is setting one meeting day, right? Or scheduling that writing day and accepting nothing else during that day. And that for me has been really tough, but I think something that makes you so much more productive.
Yes, exactly. So like Mondays and Fridays, no meetings, writing only. Some days it turns into a me day, but I feel like that's also important. So, reading and even having time to read is important, to read the latest literature. I'm sure I have a stack of journal articles this thick on my desk that I want to read that I just don't find the time for. So you got to make that time.
Yeah.
Good point. And to have that critical thinking time. Well, this is, I think we're almost out of time, and this is like super, super helpful, particularly for the mentoring core group of NIDUS. I really, really appreciate this. And remember, if anyone joined late, we will have, this is recorded. We'll have it professionally edited and put up either on NIDUS itself or I think we're creating a YouTube channel for this too, so you'll be able to access this. And again, my guess is that we may have not had as many attendees because of the timing with the Delirium Society. That I know others told me they were going to join. So let's give another big round of applause for Kirsten. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you for coming, and thank you for the opportunity. It helped me think a lot about what works for me and what doesn't work for me. So it was very good as well. So thank you so much, Donna, for the kind invitation, and everyone for coming.